Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of I Choose Love. I am Nikki and your host. And now today we're going to be discussing what exactly a spiritual awakening is. And we're going to be looking at the symptoms. Are you having one? Have you had one? And if you are having one, how do we navigate it so that you can, awaken to your consciousness and you can walk the path of love and remembering without feeling any form of disconnect from yourself, but be totally integrated with the new person that you are and this new life of love and your soul's resonance.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
So, what is a spiritual awakening though? And how do you know if you are experiencing one, or how do you know if you have experienced one? A spiritual awakening is an experience where someone has a shift in consciousness, and it is a stripping of the ego. It is a stripping of your pride, and your ego dissolves and your consciousness awakens and emerges, and you emerge being a different person based on your ego dissolving. Because when you're not spiritually awakened, you operate out of your ego. And when you operate out of your ego, you tend to choose selfish desires. You tend to choose self over service to others. But when you're awakened, then you realize that you start moving towards serving others more than yourself. So a spiritual awakening can be spurred on by a very traumatic event. For me, I think it started with my mom and my dad passing in very close proximity, short space of time. And other events in my life during that time, which became unbearable for my human form. And as a result, my ego got shattered. And from that, a newer version of myself, a more purified version of myself emerged. And I want to believe that a spiritual awakening does to the soul what fire does to gold. It purifies it. And I became a whole lot more, conscious and aware of my life's choices and just taking accountability. That was the first thing I learned, to take accountability for my actions. And even though I still do, I still shout at my kids and, I still, tell a lie here and there. I'm aware of what I'm doing and I take accountability and I catch up on myself immediately. And I'm like, you're not doing that anymore. And I correct myself. And I never did that in religion. I would just, just sin and just say, okay, I wouldn't habitually sin. But when I sinned, I would just say, okay, Jesus, I'm sorry. And it won't happen again. And you erase my sins and the blood of Jesus washes me. And I depended on that. Now I don't depend on, Jesus to remove my sins. I am now put in a position where I'm aware of my sins. I carry his consciousness. And I now realize that when I do sin, I ought to take accountability for my actions instead of blaming other people. And I think that was the whole gist of the Garden of Eden story, because, Adam blamed Eve and Eve blamed the snake, and all God wanted was accountability. No one knows how that story would have ended had Adam just taken accountability for his actions, because accountability is the first key that opens the door to authenticity. And when we become authentic, then the frequency of love follows and we ride that wave. So, so that's what a spiritual awakening is. It is actually the ego dissolving, basically, and your soul self, your true self emerging with a higher level of consciousness. And that consciousness gives birth to awareness. And that awareness will give you the urge to take accountability for your actions instead of walking around blaming people for all the things that go wrong in your life. Yes. Now, some of the habits that I definitely dropped, that you will, for me, I don't know about others, but I felt weird around certain friends. I wasn't pulled towards some of my friends anymore. I lost interest in makeup and fashion and clothing. I didn't walk around looking drab or anything, but I remember that I just lost interest in them. I didn't have a desire for, a relationship. I just wanted to grow. Yes, I wanted to learn more about the soul, and I wanted to learn more about what I was experiencing, and I wanted to create. I just wanted to create. I wanted to paint. I wanted to draw. I wanted to build. I wanted to cook. I wanted to plant. I was just always creating something. And I believe it's because I remembered who I was, and because I remember that I am, like a miniature version of God who is within me, and he's a creator. Then I remembered my true DNA to be a creator as well. And that's why you find most spiritually awakened people, they gravitate towards creating things, because that DNA, that you inherited that from your true source of life, which is God. And he's a creator. He's a master creator. So of course you're going to become creative. And I remember I lost interest in my titles. I lost interest in everything. I really did. And I only wanted to, serve others. And I grew so, I loved my job as a CNA because it gave me a lot of reassurance, and that, I could operate in love without feeling as if I was giving away too much. There were so many people to care for. I didn't have my mom and my dad to care for anymore either. So caring for the elderly gave me a lot of peace, gave me a lot of therapy as well. And it made me feel as if I was connected to my parents on another spiritual level. So that's hands down one of the best jobs I've ever had, being a CNA. Yes, I am. I'm so proud of that job. Love it. Wiping butts for a living is one of the most rewarding jobs that I think I could have ever had in this life. Yeah, absolutely love it. So those were some of the habits that I kicked. I just lost interest in most of the things that defined me before. And I became a newer version of myself. As Jesus says, he says, you cannot pour new wine into old wineskin. And I felt like literal new wine that had outgrown that old wineskin. I felt as if, I outgrew, the idea of religion. I didn't become rogue and, I hate Jesus and I hate God and I didn't become that. I became an upgraded version of that. I realized that religion had its place. It provided structure, and it gave me a stepping stone to get to where I was now at. So I was thankful for religion. I didn't see the need to hate it or curse it. No, I didn't. I just, met God on a different level. So, and I understood Jesus now to be who he truly was. And I didn't, I will go into that in another podcast. We'll discuss that. But I now understood Jesus for who he really was. And I'll leave it at that until we discuss that in another podcast, which will be coming up. As I said, this is Spiritual Hard Talk. So we're going to be talking about these things as we go along. Now, I started to question the God of the Bible, though, because the God of the Bible did no longer fit into this narrative for me, because the God of the Bible was very angry and very arrogant. Now that I was here, I kept saying, so who was that God? Because the God that I experienced in my epiphany, seeing myself come up, and I could only feel love. I could only feel acceptance. The God that I now met, he didn't have favorites. I wasn't a chosen one. As I used to walk and tell people, you're chosen. There are no chosen ones. God is not like us. He's not going to choose favorites and say, I'm going to pour more talents and more gifts into that one. No. We all signed up for a life to learn certain lessons that our soul needs to learn in this incarnation. And as we grow and evolve and we leave, we go back and we decide if we want to come back to learn new lessons or if we want to remain. And that's what I, now believe. That's what my consciousness transition. That's the belief that my consciousness transcended to. So, yeah, but I couldn't understand. I questioned that God a lot. And I even said to him, I said, so who is that? And he said, that is, that was a time and place where people needed to understand who I was, and they fit me in that narrative so that they could feel, better about themselves and to control others. And what better way to control someone than with fear? So if you fear hell, and if you fear a God in the sky who will strike you with a rod and kill you, then of course you are going to be keep in line. You're going to keep in check. I know I did, because I wasn't going to go to hell. And I was sending people to hell, but I know I wasn't going there. But for the most part, I did question that. And that God of the Bible dissolved, because I now knew a new God, a God of love, a God that was so warm and so beautiful and so accepting. And the devil also dissolved for me. I no longer saw the devil. I no longer fought the devil. It was like the devil was me all along. And the minute I started taking accountability for my actions, it's as if the devil dissolved, because he was integrated into my new person, not as an external force, but as myself, my ego wanting to be in control and wanting to choose, my own selfish desires. And, we're going to get into that in subsequent podcasts, but we're just talking about spiritual awakening, what it is, and, how to navigate it. So that God of the Bible dissolved, and the devil dissolved as well. Now, I would definitely just say, how would you know that you're having a spiritual awakening? If you become disconnected from your old person, the old version of yourself, and if you have lost interest in the things that you used to love and the things that defined you, like, your titles, your job, your car, your house, if you realize that you're now disconnected from those things and you're now seeking meaning, like meaning in other places and in other things, then you could be having a spiritual awakening. Some people who have had like serious traumatic events like near-death experiences, or go through a bitter divorce or a car accident or something that is traumatic, sometimes it spurs it on, where you realize that life is greater than, the everyday happenings. It's way more grander than that. And it starts to make you turn within for answers, not outside. It makes you start looking at yourself as the person to blame for where you're at and not other people. And if you find yourself doing these things, then you could be having a spiritual awakening, or you could have experienced one if you have experienced those things. Yes. And, for me, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. There weren't many podcasts who were talking about spiritual awakenings. So I decided to do this podcast to help others who might need to navigate through it. And my advice, or what I would suggest, not advice, because I'm not that smart to give anyone advice, but my suggestion is, if you think that you're going through this, find a spiritual guide, find teachers, read books, meditate more, be still, and just listen to your intuition and let your intuition be your guide. What is your intuition? Your intuition is your inner voice, your inner knowing. We all have a compass within our souls that will point us in the right direction. And if we just be still for, long enough, we will hear. For me, I was guided with the colors to wear. First, I was guided to wear white. Now I'm guided to wear pink. And I don't know for what reason. I don't always question why. I just listen. I know that I now have a business that is geared towards helping women heal. And it could be me wearing pink, meaning that, I am actually tapping into my feminine energy, because I know I'm such a feminine person that I wasn't before, because I'm a single mom with 4 boys. And of course, when you are a boy mom, they think you're one of them, and they want you to play Grand Theft Auto and Roblox and Minecraft, and they're bench pressing you like you are like a dumbbell or something. So for me, I was guided and I read books. I became an astute follower of Gary Sukoff, and other great teachers out there who have gone through spiritual awakenings and now serve as guides. So I would say do your research. Try to find a community of people who have gone through spiritual awakenings, who have been spiritually awakened, and just reach out to them. And, don't be afraid to go on, Instagram or TikTok. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Instagram. I'm also on YouTube, of course. Find people who have had your experience and join a community so that you do not feel confused and lost, but you feel as if you're part of the collective consciousness. And that's it for our second episode of I Choose Love. I thank you for staying with me this long. I really do hope that this episode was, beneficial to you. And I do hope that, you will use it if you need to, or share it with someone who needs to hear this. Please remember to subscribe to this channel if you think that, this is something that you would want to listen more of. And please remember to hit that like button so that, we can get a far reach. Thank you so much for joining me. And until then, beloved, continue choosing love. Bye.